Welcome back to another chapter of Oh God, Not Malfoy. Chapter 6. The morning sun filtered through the tall, mullioned windows of the History of Magic classroom. Harry sat in his usual place, or rather, where Draco Malfoy usually sat, near the middle of the room. The air was thick with the scent of old parchment and ink, a familiar aroma that mingled with the slight mustiness of the ancient stone walls. Professor Binns floated into the room precisely at 9 o'clock, his translucent form passing effortlessly through the blackboard. He began his lecture immediately, his dry, monotonous voice filling the room as he recounted the details of the giant wars of the 15th century. Today, we shall delve into the complexities of the peace treaty of 1473, brokered by the esteemed wizard Elfric the Eager. Harry tried to focus on the lecture, but his mind was elsewhere. The events of the previous night played on a loop in his head: the confrontation with Voldemort, the unexpected alliance with Snape, and the uneasy camaraderie that had formed with Crabbe and Goyle. He glanced sideways at his companions. Crabbe was doodling aimlessly on his parchment, while Goyle appeared to be on the verge of dozing off. A soft tap on his shoulder pulled Harry from his thoughts. Pansy Parkinson leaned over from the desk behind him, her dark eyes alight with curiosity. "Draco," she whispered, her voice barely audible over Professor Binns's drone. "Is it true? Were you really in the forbidden corridor last night?" Before Harry could respond, Blaise Zabini, seated in front of him, turned around with a sly grin. "Word is, you ran into some trouble," he added. "Care to share?" Several other Slytherins nearby perked up, their gazes shifting toward Harry with keen interest. Theodore Nott raised an eyebrow, his quill poised over his notes as if ready to jot down every word. Harry cleared his throat softly. "We were just exploring," he replied cautiously, keeping his voice low. "Didn't realize we were somewhere we shouldn't be." Pansy scoffed lightly. "Come on, Draco, don't be modest. I heard there was an attack. Some are saying you fought off a troll." Crabbe and Goyle exchanged nervous glances. "We don't really know what happened yet," Crabbe mumbled, his eyes fixed on the desk. "It all happened so fast." Goyle nodded in agreement. "Yeah, I'm sure Dumbledore will announce it soon." Blaise leaned in closer, a mischievous glint in his eyes. "You can't leave us hanging like that. Did you see anything interesting? Anyone we know involved?" Harry hesitated, measuring his words carefully. "Look, it's best not to spread rumors," he said evenly. "Besides, it's probably something the professors will address when they're ready." Pansy pouted slightly. "You're no fun," she teased. "But I suppose we'll find out sooner or later." From the front of the classroom, Professor Binns continued his lecture, oblivious to the undercurrent of chatter. And thus the giants retreated to the mountains, leading to a period of uneasy peace that lasted for nearly a century. Harry tried to focus on the lesson, but the murmurs around him persisted. "Do you think it's connected to the Chamber of Secrets?" Daphne Greengrass whispered to Tracy Davis. "First the petrified cat, now this?" Tracy shrugged lightly. "Who knows, but it's certainly strange, isn't it?" Harry felt a knot tighten in his stomach. The rumors were spreading faster than he anticipated. He needed to be cautious. Suddenly the classroom door creaked open, interrupting the flow of the lecture. All heads turned as Professor Snape stepped inside, his black robes billowing behind him like a shadow. "Professor Binns," Snape intoned, his voice cutting through the haze of the classroom, "may I have a word with Mr. Malfoy?" Professor Binns paused, his ethereal form flickering slightly. "Ah, yes, of course," he said distractedly, before resuming his lecture without further acknowledgement. Harry's pulse quickened as he gathered his belongings. The eyes of his classmates followed him with unabashed curiosity. Pansy shot him a questioning look, but he avoided her gaze. Outside in the corridor, the door closed softly behind them. The hallway was quiet, the distant sounds of other classes muted by thick stone walls. Snape regarded him with his usual inscrutable expression. "Mr. Malfoy," Snape began smoothly, his dark eyes piercing, "it seems you've been quite active lately." Harry met his gaze, striving to maintain a facade of composure. "I'm not sure what you mean, Professor." A faint smirk touched Snape's lips. "Don't play coy with me. Your nighttime excursions have not gone unnoticed." Harry felt a chill run down his spine. If this is about last night, we were just breaking several school rules, Snape interjected sharply, and involving yourself in matters that are far beyond your understanding. Harry bristled inwardly but kept his tone measured. "I was only trying to help." Snape's eyes narrowed. "Help? You overestimate your abilities, Mr. Malfoy. There are forces at work here that you cannot begin to comprehend." A tense silence hung between them. Harry grappled with the urge to argue, but thought better of it. Snape continued, his voice lowering. "The headmaster wishes to speak with you after your classes conclude today. You will go directly to his office. Do I make myself clear?" "Yes, sir," Harry replied quietly. Snape studied him for a moment longer, an unreadable expression flickering across his features. "Good. And Mr. Malfoy," he added, his tone carrying a subtle warning, "I suggest you tread carefully. Not everyone is as forgiving as I am." With that, Snape turned and swept down the corridor, leaving Harry standing alone in the dim light. He watched the professor's retreating form, a swirl of emotions churning within him. Returning to the classroom, Harry slipped back into his seat. Crabbe leaned over immediately. "What did Snape want?" he whispered. "Nothing important," Harry lied smoothly. "Just a reminder about proper conduct." Goyle snickered softly. "Bet he's still mad about us being out last night." "Probably," Harry agreed, forcing a casual tone. The rest of the class passed in a blur, Professor Binns's monotone narration fading into the background as Harry's thoughts raced ahead. What did Dumbledore want with him? Had Snape told the headmaster everything? Was this his opportunity to come clean about the body swap and all that had transpired? As the bell signalled the end of the lesson, students began to gather their things, the room filling with the scrape of chairs and the hum of renewed chatter. Pansy caught up with him as they exited into the corridor. "Are you sure everything's all right?" she pressed, her eyes searching his face. "You seem different today." Harry offered a reassuring smile. "I'm fine, Pansy. Just have a lot on my mind." She nodded slowly. "Well, if you need to talk—" "Thanks," he said appreciatively. "I'll let you know." Crabbe and Goyle flanked him as they made their way toward the Great Hall for lunch. "So, what's our plan for the rest of the day?" Goyle asked. Harry hesitated. "Actually, I have some things to take care of," he said carefully, "but I'll catch up with you both later." Crabbe looked mildly disappointed, but shrugged. "All right, we'll save you a seat." "See you," Harry replied, watching as they melded into the stream of students. Left alone, he took a deep breath and headed toward Dumbledore's office, his footsteps echoing softly against the stone floors. The corridors seemed longer than usual, each turn heightening his anticipation. The murmurs of curious classmates faded behind him, replaced by the distant echoes of his own footsteps. The walls were adorned with flickering torches that cast dancing patterns across tapestries depicting witches and wizards of old. Suits of armor stood sentinel in alcoves, their hollow helms seeming to watch as he passed. Harry's mind churned with a mix of apprehension and determination. The summons to Dumbledore's office weighed heavily upon him. Each turn in the corridor brought new thoughts. He ascended a winding staircase, the stone steps worn smooth by centuries of students making similar journeys. Portraits lined the walls, their inhabitants stirring from slumber or pausing mid-conversation to observe him. A witch in a ruffled collar peered over her spectacles. "Off to see the headmaster, are we?" she inquired, but Harry was too absorbed in his thoughts to respond. The castle felt different today, more somber. The usual chatter of students was subdued, whispers echoing off the high ceilings about the recent events. The petrified cat, The ominous message, the confrontation in the forbidden corridor. Harry pulled his robes tighter around himself as a draught swept through, carrying with it the scent of aged parchment and a hint of something sweet, like melting candles. Turning down another corridor, he nearly collided with nearly headless Nick, who floated along with a distracted expression. "Oh, pardon me, young Malfoy," the ghost said, tipping his head, which wobbled precariously on its remaining neck sinews, in greeting. "Not a problem," Harry mumbled, sidestepping quickly. It was still disconcerting to be addressed as Malfoy, even after weeks of inhabiting his body. Finally, he reached the corridor where the stone gargoyle guarded the entrance to Dumbledore's office. The mythical creature loomed before him, wings folded, eyes fixed in a stony stare that seemed both lifeless and attentive. Harry paused, suddenly realizing the flaw in his plan. What was the password during my first year? He racked his brain, sifting through memories that felt distant yet vivid. The image of Dumbledore offering him a candy surfaced. Lemon drop, that was it. He stepped forward confidently, but a thought nagged at him. Why the heck didn't Snape give me the password? Did he expect me to figure it out on my own? Or maybe he wanted to make this difficult. Clearing his throat, he spoke clearly to the gargoyle. Lemon drop. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a grating sound of stone against stone, the gargoyle shifted aside, revealing a spiral staircase that began to rotate upward like a slow-moving escalator. Harry stepped onto the staircase, which carried him smoothly upward. The walls around him were adorned with portraits of previous headmasters and headmistresses, their eyes following his ascent with keen interest. Some whispered among themselves, but their voices were too soft for him to discern. Reaching the top, he found himself facing a large oak door with an ornate brass knocker shaped like a griffin. Taking a steadying breath, he raised his hand and knocked firmly. "Enter," came Dumbledore's serene voice from within. Harry pushed the door open and stepped inside. The circular office was just as he remembered, bookshelves crammed with ancient tomes reaching up to the domed ceiling, curious silver instruments whirring and emitting puffs of smoke on spindle-legged tables, and the warm glow of sunlight filtering through the high windows, casting a kaleidoscope of colours from the stained glass. But his attention was immediately drawn to the centre of the room. Professor Quirrell sat slumped in a high-backed chair, unconscious, ropes of golden light binding him securely. Nearby, the pensieve rested on Dumbledore's desk, its silvery contents swirling lazily. The ethereal glow illuminated Dumbledore's thoughtful expression as he stood beside it, his long fingers tapping together gently. "Ah, Mr. Malfoy," Dumbledore said, his eyes, behind half-moon spectacles, meeting Harry's with an inscrutable gaze. "Thank you for coming." "Professor," Harry began, his voice catching slightly. The sight of Quirrell, tied and vulnerable, sent a jolt through him. It was one thing to know of the darkness lurking within the castle, it was another to see it laid bare. "Please, have a seat." Dumbledore gestured to a comfortable chair opposite his desk. Harry crossed the room, his footsteps muffled by the richly woven carpet. As he sat, he couldn't help but glance again at Quirrell and the pensieve. The realization struck him. Dumbledore had been exploring Quirrell's memories. "Your encounter in the forbidden corridor has raised some questions," Dumbledore began, settling into his own chair. "I thought it prudent that we discuss them." Harry nodded slowly. "I understand." Dumbledore studied him for a moment, his gaze penetrating yet kind. "You have been quite involved in recent events, haven't you?" There was a subtle invitation in Dumbledore's tone, a gentle nudge that felt like the first ray of sunlight breaking through a clouded sky. Harry's heart pounded in his chest, each beat echoing the gravity of the secret he was about to reveal. The soft whirring and ticking of the silver instruments on the spindly tables around the office seemed to synchronize with his racing thoughts. This was Dumbledore, the one person who might believe him, who might help set things right. But could he trust him with something so unbelievable? "Professor," Harry began cautiously, his voice barely above a whisper, There's something I need to tell you. Something incredibly important." Dumbledore's blue eyes twinkled softly behind his half-moon spectacles as he leaned forward slightly, folding his long fingers atop the polished desk. "I am here to listen, Harry," he said kindly. "Please, go on." Harry took a deep breath, steeling himself. "I'm not who you think I am," he said steadily. "I'm not Draco Malfoy." One of Dumbledore's eyebrows arched ever so slightly. "Indeed?" he murmured, his tone inviting yet inscrutable. "And who are you, if not young Mr. Malfoy?" Summoning all his courage, Harry met Dumbledore's gaze directly. "I'm Harry Potter." A profound silence enveloped the room, broken only by the soft rustling of Fawkes the Phoenix rearranging his brilliant scarlet feathers on his golden perch. Dumbledore's expression remained serene, though his eyes searched Harry's face with keen interest, as if trying to glimpse the truth behind them. "That is quite a remarkable claim," Dumbledore said softly. "Perhaps you could explain how this extraordinary situation has come to pass." Harry nodded, the words tumbling out in a rush. "It happened during my 6th year, or what was supposed to be my 6th year. Draco and I were dueling in the Room of Requirement. He was on a mission from Voldemort, and I was trying to stop him. During the fight, we both grabbed hold of a time-turner at the same moment. There was this surge of magic, and when I woke up, I found myself in his body, back in time, and he was in mine." Dumbledore leaned back slightly, his fingers steepled beneath his chin. "Time-turners are not designed to transport one so far into the past," he mused. "Their enchantments are limited to short-term temporal adjustments." "I know," Harry agreed earnestly, "but the magic in the Room of Requirement must have interacted with the time-turner in some unexpected way. It created an anomaly, sending us back years instead of hours." The Headmaster regarded him thoughtfully. "And since awakening in this time, you have been navigating life as Draco Malfoy?" "Yes," Harry confirmed. "I've been trying to set things right, but it's been difficult. Draco in my body has been causing problems. I was hoping you could help me reverse whatever happened." Dumbledore was silent for a moment, his gaze distant as he considered Harry's words. The soft glow of the candles cast elongated shadows across the walls, and the portraits of former headmasters and headmistresses appeared to lean in closer, their painted eyes fixed upon the two of them. "Your story is indeed extraordinary," Dumbledore finally said, "and while it challenges many of our understandings about time and magic, I am inclined to believe that you are sincere." Relief washed over Harry like a wave. "Thank you, Professor," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "However," Dumbledore continued gently, "such a matter requires careful consideration and verification. Memories, as you know, can provide invaluable insight. Would you be willing to share yours with me?" Harry hesitated briefly. The idea of someone delving into his most personal thoughts was unsettling, but he knew it was necessary. "Yes," he agreed resolutely, "whatever it takes." "Excellent," Dumbledore said with a reassuring smile. He rose gracefully and retrieved a shallow stone basin etched with ancient runes, the pensieve, from a cabinet behind his desk. Placing it between them, he drew his wand and approached Harry. "This will not harm you," he assured. "Simply focus on the memories you wish to share." Harry closed his eyes, concentrating on the chain of events, the tension-filled duel with Draco, the simultaneous grasping of the time-turner, the dizzying whirl of magic, and the shock of awakening in Draco's body. He recalled the challenges he faced navigating Slytherin House, the unsettling encounters with his friends who didn't recognize him, and his desperate attempts to find a solution. He felt a curious sensation as Dumbledore gently placed the tip of his wand to his temple, a light tugging, as though a silvery thread was being drawn from his mind. Opening his eyes, he watched as a shimmering strand of memory coiled around the wand's tip before being deposited into the swirling depths of the pensieve. "Shall we?" Dumbledore gestured toward the basin. Together they leaned over the pensieve, and the office dissolved around them. They stood side by side in the Room of Requirement, unseen observers to the intense duel unfolding between Harry and Draco. Spells ricocheted off towering piles of forgotten objects, casting flashes of light and shadow. The pivotal moment came when both boys seized the time turner, their hands clasping it simultaneously as a blinding light enveloped them. The scene shifted rapidly. They witnessed Harry's disorientation upon waking in the Malfoy manor, the shock of seeing Draco's reflection in the mirror, and the isolation he felt as he navigated the castle in an unfamiliar body. They saw Draco, in Harry's body, interacting with Ron and Hermione, his manipulations subtle yet impactful. As the memories played out, they watched the encounter in Moaning Myrtle's bathroom, the confrontation with Quirrell, and the revelation of Voldemort's presence. The emotions were raw and vivid: fear, frustration, determination. When the last memory faded, they were gently pulled back into the present, standing once more in Dumbledore's dimly lit office. The headmaster's expression was contemplative, his eyes reflecting a mix of concern and admiration. "Your experiences have been quite harrowing," Dumbledore said softly, "and your resilience in the face of such adversity is commendable." "Do you believe me now?" Harry asked, searching Dumbledore's face. "Yes, Harry," Dumbledore affirmed, his gaze steady. "I believe your account. Time is a complex tapestry, and it seems you have become entangled in its threads in a most unusual way." Harry hesitated before speaking. "Professor, there's something else I need to tell you." Dumbledore looked at him attentively. "Go on." "In my timeline, in the future, you and I were working together to stop Voldemort," Harry explained. "You told me about Horcruxes, how he split his soul into pieces to become immortal. One of those Horcruxes is Tom Riddle's diary, and it's in the school right now." Dumbledore's eyes sharpened at the mention of Horcruxes. "How did you come by this knowledge?" "In my second year, Lucius Malfoy gave the diary to a student. It took over her body, and she opened the Chamber of Secrets," Harry said earnestly. "Voldemort would have returned if I hadn't destroyed the Horcrux." A shadow passed over Dumbledore's face, his expression becoming grave. "Horcruxes are among the darkest forms of magic," he said quietly. "That such an artifact is within Hogwarts is deeply troubling." "I was hoping you could help me find it and destroy it," Harry implored, "before it's too late." "Do you know who might have the diary?" Dumbledore asked. Harry shook his head. "I don't know for certain. In my time it was given to Ginny Weasley, but she isn't at Hogwarts yet. All I know is Draco in my body has given it to someone. It could be anyone." Dumbledore's gaze grew distant as he considered this. "We must proceed carefully," he said. "I will enlist the help of trusted staff to discreetly search for the diary." Harry hesitated, a knot forming in his stomach. "Professor, you mentioned trusted staff. You're not planning to involve Snape, are you?" Dumbledore's gaze rested on Harry, his eyes thoughtful. "Professor Snape is one of the people I had in mind, yes." "With all due respect," Harry said urgently, leaning forward in his chair, "in my timeline, Snape was helping Draco with Voldemort's tasks. I don't think we can trust him." A faint smile played on Dumbledore's lips. "I understand your concerns, Harry, but I assure you, Severus Snape's loyalty is not in question." "But," Harry began, but Dumbledore raised a hand gently to pause him. "Severus has proven himself time and again," Dumbledore said, his voice firm yet reassuring. He nodded subtly toward the corner of the room, and for the first time since entering, Harry noticed Quirrell, still unconscious and bound by golden cords. Harry's eyes widened. How could he have forgotten? The weight of the night's revelations had pushed Quirrell's presence from his mind. Professor Snape was instrumental in uncovering Professor Quirrell's divided loyalties, Dumbledore continued. He has risked much to protect this school and its students. Taking a deep breath, Harry tried to refocus. "Professor, in my timeline, we discovered multiple Horcruxes. Voldemort split his soul into 7 pieces. He's tried to come back more than once." Dumbledore's expression grew more serious, the lines on his face deepening. 7 Horcruxes. he repeated, a hint of sorrow in his voice. "That is more than I feared." "In that case," Dumbledore said softly, his eyes flickering toward the pensive, "I would like you to walk me through Voldemort's actions year by year. Your experiences could provide invaluable insight into preventing future tragedies." Dumbledore offered a gentle smile. "We should set up daily meetings. After all, you've already mastered the material taught in your first year. This way, we can focus on more pressing matters during our time together." A thought struck Harry, and his brow furrowed with concern. "What will happen with Professor Quirrell?" Dumbledore's expression grew more solemn. "I have a few more memories I need to extract from him," he explained. "After that, I'm obligated to inform the Ministry of Magic about his actions. I expect he will face a trial, and if found guilty, spend time in Azkaban." Harry nodded slowly, absorbing the weight of the situation. The image of Azkaban, the dark fortress guarded by soul-sucking Dementors, sent a chill down his spine. Despite everything, he couldn't help but feel a pang of pity for Quirrell, ensnared by Voldemort's influence. "I understand," Harry said quietly. Dumbledore regarded him thoughtfully. "You carry a great burden of knowledge, Harry. Sharing it will not be easy, but it may very well change the course of our world's future." Harry took a deep breath, his gaze drifting to the swirling memories within the pensive. "I have a lot of memories to share with you," he admitted, the enormity of his experiences pressing heavily upon him. "This may take a while." A warm, reassuring light shone in Dumbledore's eyes. "We have as much time as needed," he said kindly. "And remember, you are not alone in this. Together we will face whatever challenges arise." Feeling a renewed sense of purpose, Harry stood a little straighter. "Thank you, Professor." "Now," Dumbledore continued, his tone gentle yet purposeful, "I believe some rest is in order. It's been a long day, and you'll need your strength for what's to come." Harry hesitated for a moment. "What should I tell my friends? The other Slytherins? They'll have questions." Dumbledore's eyes twinkled softly. "For now, it might be best to keep the details between us." "All right," Harry agreed, though he couldn't help but feel a twinge of guilt at the thought of keeping secrets from his new and only friends. As he turned to leave, Dumbledore called after him. "And Harry?" He paused at the doorway, looking back. "Yes, Professor." "Your courage and honesty today have shown great maturity," Dumbledore said, a hint of pride in his voice. "I have no doubt that together we can overcome the shadows of the past." A faint smile touched Harry's lips. "Thank you." Leaving the headmaster's office, Harry felt a tumult of emotions. Relief at finally sharing his burden, apprehension about the daunting tasks ahead, and a flicker of hope that perhaps this time things could be different. The castle corridors were quiet, the usual hustle of students absent at this late hour. The soft glow of torches cast elongated shadows on the stone walls, and the air was tinged with the faint scent of burning wood and old parchment. As he descended deeper into the dungeons toward the Slytherin common room, the atmosphere grew cooler, the air heavy with dampness. Portraits of stern-looking witches and wizards eyed him suspiciously as he passed, their whispers barely audible, but their mistrust palpable. Harry pulled Draco's robes tighter around himself, the unfamiliar weight of the Slytherin emblem on his chest a constant reminder of his current predicament. Later that night, as sleep began to claim him, a final thought crossed his mind. Perhaps by changing the past, I can not only save myself, but others as well.